Hey, this is Jason with 4W Knives. Today's project is going to be taking this 5160 leaf spring leftover piece and turning it into this little EDC hunting knife, whatever you want it to be, knife. Once I get the forge fired up, I go to the anvil. I've already cut in the tip. Why? Because I'm lazy. Honestly, it just makes it go a whole lot faster. I work on the tip and then work my way back. This was already pretty close to the width that I wanted. It's a good thickness as well. I had already taken this piece to the roller mill. It was supposed to be used for a draw knife, but I got it a little too thin for a draw knife. So I'm just making this knife out of it. But once I get it down to a pretty good width, I work my way back towards the handle. The most difficult part of this, shaping a knife for me, is keeping the thickness universal. Every time that I hit it on the spine or the belly of the knife to shape it, it has to push that steel somewhere, and that steel goes into thickness wherever I hit the hammer at. So I have to maintain that. I'm always afraid of going too far. This one, I ended up having to do a little bit of extra grinding to get it to the thickness universal, but it wasn't terrible. I'm sure there's a method or a way to help prevent this, but being self-taught, other than by YouTube, I just had to figure it out as I go. All right, after getting it to a rough shape on the anvil, I take it to the 2x72 and I finish the shaping process. I use a 36 grit belt and I get it down to the exact shape that I wanted. I got this by drawing a picture of the knife onto the forged knife and then ground it out. After getting it to the final shape, I do a little bit of surface grinding on the flat platen. I get it down to fairly even, other than there's a little bit of a taper on the handle. I didn't intend to do it, but I went ahead and went with it. Got it down, overall knife down to 0.14, and after I did this, I was going to go drill the pinholes, but it was way too hard. So I thought, well, since I got to heat it up anyways to anneal it, I'll go ahead and put some texture in it. So I put texture in it using the straight peen, very similar to the way that I just did the camp knife. Put it in there, heated it back up to critical temperature, and then I put it in an ash bucket that I have set up just for annealing the steel whenever it gets work hardened. I leave it in there for about 4 hours. And then when I pull it out, I'm able to go to the drill press, and it drilled really easily, as you'll see here. If you notice during the forging process, I did not forge in my bevels. I did not do this because I wanted to try out the bottom wheel on the flat platen that came with the Ameribraid to see how good of a hollow grind I could put on a knife. It's a smaller wheel than the 10-inch wheel that I normally use, so it took quite a bit of getting used to. You'll especially see early on here, it kept kind of grabbing the knife and pulling it down. There was a lot of chatter. I learned I was pressing too hard, so I let up a little bit on the pressure, and I was able to start getting a more even grind. It still wasn't as good as what I would normally do with my 10-inch, but I really think once I get it hardened and I come back to do my finish grinding with the higher grit belts, that I'll be able to clean it up quite a bit. This was pretty neat experience. I'm glad that I was trying it. I still think I prefer the 10-inch wheel, but for this knife and this kind of knife, I think this bottom wheel will do exactly what I need. After doing the 3 normalizing cycles that I always do on my knives, I got it up to critical temp and quenched it in the vegetable oil. It came out hard, came out straight, so I went straight to the temper after this. All right, so out of temper, I put an 80 grit belt. It had been used a little bit, so I cleaned it up first, and I start my finish grinding process. I start with an 80 grit belt, work my way up to a conditioning belt. The process was a little bit easier once the steel was hardened and I started going up in grits and belt. It still wasn't as easy as the 10-inch wheel, but it could definitely do the job if this is the only thing I had. Here's a conditioning belt, and I'm just using this on the flats to remove any of the black that came with it, because I didn't want to mess up the texture that I put in it, so I just cleaned it up, and then I'm doing my final passes on the conditioning belt on the bevels. I went with these black and white with a little bit of gray scales. I've used them before. I lined them with red G10 liner just to give it a little bit of thickness and a little bit more color pop. Tape them to the knife, mark the holes, and I drill it. Once I drill one hole, I put the pin in it. That way I can keep it in the same spot. The tape does a pretty good job of this, but it does have a little bit of flex, and you don't want your holes to get misaligned. So the way I do it, and I would do this whether I was using super glue or anything, I glue one hole, put the pin in, glue the next hole, put the pin in, drill the next hole. Once I've done all three holes on this side, I'll put the other scale on it where I want it, position it, tape it up, put two pins in, drill as I'm doing here, put the new pin all the way through, and then I'll do the next pin and so on. With the pins holding the scales in place on the knife, I start with the small wheel attachment to do my rough grind. I get all the finger swells, and then I make my way over to the flat platen using the rubber contact wheel at the bottom to do the spine in the end of the knife. After I've done that, I'll take the scales off and I'll do the taper at the end of it. As you see here, I'll draw it, grind both of them at the same time, and then I'll do the little tapering on the side. Once I do this, we'll go to a 220 belt on the grinder, and then I hand sand to generally 600. After I've given it time for the glue to set up, I go ahead and do the flats and then just the little bit of contouring. These are pretty thin, so there's not a whole lot of shaping. Just get off the hard edges and make it comfortable in the hand. All right, here it is. It's all finished up. I'll give some glamour shots here in a minute. Thought turned out pretty decent. I like these scales. They're simple, not too flashy. I do like those. Probably not my favorite knife that I've ever made. I don't know what you think. I think with the blade length, it almost looks like the handle is just a little stubby. I've done this shape of knife before. Maybe I made adjustments while I was doing it to make it longer. I had never really noticed it, but I don't know. I mean, it's not bad. It doesn't ruin a knife. I just think it could have been a little bit better. It is pretty sharp. See if I can. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a whole bunch of hair. It shaves really good. Don't know what type of knife it is. What do you think? I don't know. It would definitely skin. Definitely be an everyday carry. I thought maybe bushcraft, But I don't know, with it being a hollow grind, is that the best design for a bushcraft? I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'm curious. I had a pretty good discussion going on one of the knife groups about my camp knife. Everybody called it a sax, which it probably was a sax, but it was also a camp knife. So just kind of curious. Let me know what you think. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I enjoyed making it. I hope you like the product that I produced. I'm sitting at just over 400 subscribers right now. My plan is when I hit that 500, I'm going to do a knife giveaway. I've done one, enjoyed doing it, but to get to that 500 subscribers, I'm going to need some people to subscribe. So jump on board and we'll see what we can make. And you can check me out on Facebook at 4W Knives, and I also have a TikTok at 4W Knives.